Hi, my name's Chris. Welcome back. In this video, I'm going to do an unboxing and review of this 10 amp power planer. You want to see that? Stick around. Okay, now upfront full disclosure, this planer was provided to me at no cost from the Banggood website. I was curious about that website for a while. They actually reached out to me and requested me to review some tools. This was unsolicited, but I did not request this specific planer. I promised them absolutely nothing in return other than an unbiased review of their tool. They sent me this free of charge and are allowing me to keep it beyond the period of this review. But I can promise you that in no way will my review be influenced by that transaction. Just up front, I will say I'm impressed with this. So if you want to know further, just know that my take on this is I've only used one of these, I think, a handful of times in the past, and I can see ways that I can incorporate this into my workflow on almost a daily basis now. So I'm fully kind of come full circle on the use of one of these in even a small benchtop workshop like my own. So stick around to the end of the video. You'll hear the pros, cons, and then how I compare this to some other planers that are out there in the industry. I hope you watch to the end of the video. Thanks for watching. This is my first interaction with the company, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience with their website and their shipping as we go throughout this video. So the first thing we're going to do is just unbox it. Shipping took only a few days to get to my door. It was similar to an Amazon order. This order was placed on one day, and I think the package arrived 2 or 3 days later. Really nicely packaged, nicely branded. It's branded as TopShak. Apparently you got to have a Boston accent. There's a shark fin looking thing up here. I don't know if that's implied or not, but yeah, some kind of edge guide. See what's in here. Got quite a bit of weight to it. Probably weighs about 10 or 15 pounds. Kind of looks Black & Decker-ish. Just as a note, I'll have this thing unplugged anytime I'm working around the cutter head or around its moving parts here. So first thing I'm going to do is look at the instruction manual, and I'll get back with you whenever I'm complete reading that. Okay, so this is kind of interesting. There's a warranty card in here. It says you now have a 12 months manufacturer's warranty. Order via Banggood. See this link, scan the QR code, and if you order it through AliExpress or another retailer, they want you to contact them for your warranty claims. Let's talk a little bit about the brand name of the tools. So looking in the box, everything came encased in plastic. This cardboard insert kind of held everything fixed in place. As I picked up the box, you could feel about a 15-pound weight, but nothing shifted around or moved. So I think the packaging is pretty effective for this. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at what came in the box. So really, basically, you have the planer, this edge guide, and all the accessories for the edge guide. You also have an adapter for this dust port here. A tool like this, just like any kind of milling tool, is going to generate a large volume of pretty large chips, so you're going to want to use some kind of a dust extractor that can keep up with it. Dust bags are really worthless in my opinion for a tool like this. Not only will they fill up super fast, but the chips that it's going to make are going to jam up in this bag, so this bag's kind of one way for those chips, and you'd spend as much time emptying this bag as you would just cleaning up the chips that are going to blow onto the ground. But if this is like the few I've used, it's going to throw chips absolutely everywhere. So general specs, this is a Model TS EP3 planer. It's I'm in the US. This is a 120 volt 60 hertz tool. This motor is rated at 10 amps. It's got a planing width of 110 millimeters or 4 3/8 inches. That's a pretty wide surface for a small planer like this. It says planing depth is 3 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch, which I agree, that's about as deep of a cut as you would ever want to take with one of these handheld planers. High risk of kickback, and if you're hogging with one of these things, it's just a tool that you can easily lose control of, and you want to be in complete control of a tool like this. It's got an exposed cutter head. That goes right into the no load speed is 16,000 revolutions per minute, and the overall length is 192 millimeters. and it says it weighs 4.4 kilograms. So let's look at the primary components of this. This shoe looks like it's pretty well made. Just looking at it, just by eye, everything seems like it's pretty coplanar between the front and the rear shoe. Something that's interesting is this is made out of what appears to be aluminum. There's a chance it could be magnesium, but I'm guessing it's aluminum. This rear plate has milling marks where it was milled flat. I think that, yeah, those are end mill marks. You can hear it as my fingernails go across it. The front shoe has a higher surface finish on it. It was probably ground. You can see some rotary marks here from where it was either polished or ground. And of course, the way this tool operates, similar to a jointer, is this front shoe, you raise and lower it by way of this knob right here. And by adjusting this up and down, you change your depth of cut. So that's the shoe. Let's look at the cutter head itself. So I'm assuming there's two cutters on this. This spindle is aluminum. Okay, so it's a 2-knife cutter head, and where the cutter head, the blade itself has 2 cutting edges. I like the way it's clamped in there. It's kind of interesting. So the cutter head itself, like we said, it's a 16,000 RPM cutter head. There's 2 knives in it, so really you're getting 32,000 cuts per minute, and then you can just calculate your feed rate as whatever you would push it to determine what kind of surface finish you could get with the tool like this. Anytime you store something like this, you're going to want to make sure the shoe is down below the cutter head to protect it, and when you unplug it, you can even rotate that blade back in on the cutter head so that you're not at risk of damaging or nicking one of those knives. Somebody like myself, I would actually store this probably more than I would use it. It's one of those, it's the tool for the job when you need it, and so it's a nice to have on the shelf, and then whenever you need it on a job site, you'll know you need it, and you'll be able to pull it out, and it'll be like butter, it'll be the tool for the job. And really, this is just a power version of a plane like this, where you're going to use it in smoothing and flattening operations. This thing's more for rough work, or what I would say maybe job site type use. Okay, so looking at this depth of cut, this is all appears to be in metric units. So this, if this reads correctly, this goes from 0 to 3 millimeters depth of cut. I think we said in English it's about a 1/16 of an inch. And each one of these clicks is a 0.1 millimeter depth of cut adjustment. So 0, there, everything should be completely underneath. So something to note, that as this tool is rotating, this cutter head's going to rotate kind of like a circular saw blade. It's going to rotate down and into the workpiece, and so you're feeding it on a climb cut just like you would a router. And similar to that also, if you happen to snag on anything, this tool will want to kick kind of back in this direction. Okay, so let's talk about the general uses for a tool like this. This is not something that I typically use in my workflow. That's why I don't own one that's why I didn't own one until now. Really, it's because it's, in my opinion, more of a specialty tool. I just, in my workflow, I don't have. Typically, this is used in construction on the job site. A framer may go back and use one of these as they're framing walls. Sometimes those studs are out of alignment, or they'll have a bow in them, or one will be slightly out of plumb just due to poor material choice or just the way the wall goes up. And sometimes a framer will come back and actually plane those studs back into alignment before the drywaller comes in, or a good drywaller may come in and actually true up those framed walls before they hang drywall, just to make sure that their drywall sheets aren't bowed, or those panels aren't struck in any way by being wrapped around these inconsistent studs. That's one use in framing construction. Another use, a lot of timber framers will use these to smooth surfaces. Some of those boards are cut on a bandsaw mill, or even with a chainsaw, and they'll use this to get some of those saw marks out, or even to add texture to that final beam surface. They're best used, just like any plane, on material that is narrower than this shoe. So in this case, it would be 4 3/8, or I think that's 110 millimeters on width. And then you can see this cutter head sticks out a little bit beyond the shoe. The purpose of that is so you can actually cut a rabbet or a shiplap joint on the edge. So if you're sheathing with boards, you can actually cut a rabbet on one of them, and you can do a shiplap joint where those two rabbets overlap, and you actually get material to overlap, kind of like a shingle or a piece of siding wood whenever you're framing. So those are three kind of framing uses. And then In finish carpentry, sometimes when you're hanging doors or shimming windows and frames and things, these are good to have because you can take off material and just kind of finesse something to the dimensions you need it. An example of that would be if you have a door and you've cut it to what you think is the final width or height and you're about to hang that door or key it, you may need to take off a little bit of material to fit that door, into its frame. It may be too wide and you may need to true it up a little bit just to fit into that frame. Hope that makes sense. But those are a couple uses. Some people have rough slabs that they'll use. You can use this on surfaces that are wider than the shoe, but kind of like a belt sander, you just gotta be careful with gouging. This thing can really dig in. You can also chamfer edges. I kind of forgot about that, but you could run it down to chamfer an edge. Say you just, back to that timber frame construction example, say you have a big beam, you may want to just knock that edge down on something, and this is a great tool for that. It's a little bit faster than a block plane or a hand plane, especially if you're doing large surfaces or repetitive cuts. So those are kind of the common uses for something like this. Really in my case, unless I'm working with some maybe reclaimed lumber, or I have a project that somebody's brought some old wood to me that I just want to smooth it down a little bit before I start to work with it, or I'm taking it from a rough form. A good example of this would be like a mantle. Somebody brings you an old timber from a barn and they want you to make a mantle out of it. You could use this to smooth up the back of that where there's really no other way. These things are a little bit more aggressive, quite a bit more aggressive than a hand plane, and with that you can smooth something a lot faster than with a belt sander or with a plane, hand plane or a belt sander. So those are some of the kind of the applications for this tool. So the only thing left is to test it out. I don't have any really wide hard material. I'll run a piece of oak through this thing and see how it does. And I'm really interested in how my shop vac can keep up with this as a dust extractor into my dust collection bin. So I'm very curious how well that's going to remove the chips and how big of a mess I'm going to make with this thing. So we'll set up that test, and that'll be the next thing that you'll see me do. All right, so I've got 3 tests set up here that I think should put this thing through its paces, at least for an initial use. I've got a wide panel here, you can see. It's got a glue joint here that's not quite even, and I'm just going to see how it does planing a wide surface. There's some knots here. I'll have to secure this because it's a little bit cupped. I've got a 2-inch wide piece of oak here that's been bandsawed, so it's got a pretty rough edge, and I'm going to see how well I can smooth that. And then I've got a 2x4 here that's got some knots in it and some figure. I'm going to run a squaring joining cut on this one. I'll probably face join it, and then I'll also cut a chamfer on it. So those are the tests I'm going to run now. This is my first use of this planer. I'll throw a detail photo here, but right here is where the edge guide attaches. It's also got a unique little kind of depth stop type thing here. I'm not exactly sure what this is. It's not described in the manual, but it appears to be basically a depth stop where you can set it to remove the total amount of material you want to, and then you can kind of keep your eye on that. But I'm not sure. I'll just have to play with this and see how I can incorporate it into the function. All of my passes, I'm going to take a very small amount off, in generally less than 1 millimeter or no more than 1/16 of an inch on any of these passes, especially on this. What I'm going to try to do is treat this as though I'm just trying to smooth out this glue joint, get a nice even surface on this panel, and we'll see how this works out. And of course, as with any power tool, I'm going to wear hearing protection, eye protection, and I've got my sleeves out of the way. I get rid of my ring here, and I've got power close by, and I've got dust collection coming out of my overhead mount here. So the first cut I'm going to make is just going to be a smoothing cut on the edge of this 2x4, just to use the planer and get a feel for how it cuts. I'm not going to attach any kind of dust collection, just so we can kind of all see it spew in the chips, so we have that as a comparison later. Everything is stock right out of the box. take one more pass like this, and I think I'm going to throw the dust collection on it because we're already starting to throw chips. It is wanting to grab here. This is where some of that grain gets a little bit gnarly, and you can see I'm kind of getting my feel for it. The weight is definitely over the back end, which isn't a bad thing. As you come off the cut, you want to keep that heel down. As you start the cut, you want to keep your pressure on that front shoe, and then as you kind of get in the middle of the cut, it's just like a jointer. You want to keep your pressure then on the outfeed side, and then maintain that, and then as you get to the end, you actually kind of want to keep the pressure down, but then take off the end of the cut so that you're not sniping that board. Keep going until I get that figure out of there. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and throw some dust collection on. See how that does. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that performance. Now we're going to rotate it on its edge with some of this curl up. Let's take a few passes on that. Let me go ahead and throw my apron on here because my dust collection switch is on here. Okay, so the grain reverses two places in this board. It's a little gnarly here around this knot and this knot, but with that, it smoothed this board pretty well. I have no kind of chatter marks or anything. I have no snipe on either end of this board. So for a handheld planer, I'm pretty tickled with that. Let's go ahead and just demonstrate putting a chamfer on this board. So you can see what that looks like. Voice is a little loud. Okay. I'm just going to freehand this chamfer. Okay, so I don't know if you saw that. It was a little awkward here on this grain. This is, I'm serious, for a 2x4, this is some really hard fur, and the grain's really gnarly here. So any of that awkwardness, I think, is just me. Back here where the grain's fine, I was able to keep a consistent angle. So definitely possible to chamfer with these. I have seen on some brands, oh, I have it on here too. I'm a knucklehead and I need to be using this. This center spot right here is actually for chamfer specifically. So let me see if I can't get that to ride. So let's try that again on the opposite edge. So some of these handheld planers have this and some don't. This is actually for chamfering specifically. These grooves, you actually lock the corner of the board on your first pass into that groove, and that's supposed to guide it to help you keep a more consistent angle on the chamfer itself. You can also use the fence as a secondary point of reference, but because I have this board chucked up in this vise, I don't want the fence because I'm afraid it'll get in the way of the actual vise. All right. So I'm not even going to attempt to show you that on camera. But what I did is I put about a 45-degree chamfer that's about a 1/4 inch wide edge. That would take multiple passes with a block plane. And I'm pretty happy with how consistent this is along the edge. So not too bad for a power tool and one pass. Now let's face plane this piece of oak and see how well we can smooth it up. Let me see, I don't know if that'll show on camera, but it's got a lot of bandsaw marks. This surface varies probably about a full 1/8 of an inch just due to the profile. Like a piece of oak. So it definitely needs trued up. And this is something I would not take to a jointer because it's too thin. So this is actually an application where a handheld plane, whether it's an actual bench plane or one of these, is the right tool for the job, because there's no way I would push this through on a joiner. I mean, you could use 2 push blocks, but this is getting close to the shortest piece you would want to run through on a joiner. So let's go ahead and see how this does. I'm extremely impressed with this. I don't know if you can see that surface finish, but that is that doesn't even need sanded. I mean, that is smooth. There's a deep gouge here. You can see it's not sniped at all, but this is just where that bandsaw went down, and so it's smooth here, but not quite here. I would have to take a couple more passes to get down to that deep gouge. And then this end, you can see where it's chamfered, where that profile curved away from the surface. But this, that's something I wouldn't have even, I mean, it would have taken quite a bit of work with a hand plane and small passes just because of the grain to keep it from tearing out. I am impressed with that cut. That's pretty cool. All right, so now for the real test here is, let me set up for this cut. Okay, so what I'm gonna do here is just take some passes. I'm gonna work my way from one end to the other so that I'm removing a consistent amount of material, a cutter width at a time. Across the face, you can see I've got some gouges here, I've got a glue joint, I've got some knots, so quite a bit of, and then of course it's a wide panel that I really don't want to chew up. I don't want to have to take too much thickness off, and what I'm really trying to avoid here is extra sanding. So if I can avoid all that by using this tool, I will be a happy camper. And of course you can see this panel is too wide to fit through at least my joiner. I have a 13-inch joiner, and this thing is 19.5 inches wide, so you'd need a 20-inch joiner minimum to be able to plane something like this. Or you can get out the old hand planes and scrub it across the grain, and then smooth it going with the grain, and then work out any of those cutting marks with some sanding or scraping. Or we'll see how this does. I'm going to take fine passes and just go, like I said, one row at a time. All right, so here you can see I was working on this glue joint, and I left a pretty good raised section here. You can get a fingernail in it pretty easily. So what I found is you gotta establish your reference height, and then here where I kind of worked from, okay, each width I'm leaving a mark. So I gotta figure, it's a technique thing, I think. I think there is a way to do it without leaving these big gouges. But the only way to really do it might be to plane across the grain. Let me see what happens when I take a pass like that. There are some spots here where I managed, on my first pass across, I managed to not really leave a track between the edges. And I think that's because I was able to reference only on the higher wood. And when I started to reference on lower spots, that's when I started to leave some of those gouges. So I think if you were able to keep the majority of the weight and your pressure of the shoe on the higher spot, just to where it's cutting on the higher spot, but it can, when it gets down to the right level, it's referencing on the lower spot. I think that's the technique you kind of have to use. I think that's more trial and error and operator. Like I said, there were times where I was able to not leave tracks. Really, it's like any milling tool, the wider the better when you're doing a wide panel. Interesting. So I must say, there's more uses for this in my shop. Like I said, this panel itself is a challenge. What I actually need to laminate this panel with another one for a toolbox I'm going to be making for my youngest child, and I was thinking through my process for how I was going to do that, and I'm just going to cross laminate another piece of another 3/4 inch panel on top of it, and I was worried about how to get that glue surface nice and flat on both panels so that I can get a good glue joint here to cross laminate those two panels. And this may may feed into some of that, at least for smoothing out those glue joints and getting me off in the right direction. So I'm overall pretty impressed with this thing. It's definitely not lacking for power in any way. All right, so the results are in. I'm ready to give my final assessment of this tool. Up front, two things. So one, Banggood has provided me a link to a discount promotion that's good at least through the 31st of December 2021. That link will be down below. That's for a total retail price in the US with shipping of $71.96. So since we're on the subject of price, I did some basic market research, and looking at kind of the higher end of the range, a Makita or a Bosch and about a 3-inch planer is going to run you about $150 to $250. On the price low end, you get a Harbor Freight planer. It's much smaller than this for $45, and Wen can be had for about $50. So it seems like it's priced pretty competitively is really my assessment on that. And I think their normal retail price is, actually I'm not sure. I think it's at or north of $100. It might be $150 without the promotion. So all that's out there for you to consider. Let's start out with some of the things I think are kind of in the middle. So first of all, this brand's an unknown to me. This whole experience with their website, with their interface, with their shipping, all brand new to me. I was pretty pleased, well, not pretty pleased. It was equal to Amazon's shipping timeline. I don't think they did anything special for me with sending me these. They just triggered their normal sales mechanism, and their normal shipping took effect, and it arrived to me. Like I said, they sent me multiple tools, and they were bundled together with a nice shrink wrap that actually kind of it matched the branding and the packaging on this. So I was pretty impressed with the shipping. The overall build quality, pretty good. This is all glass-filled plastic. There's a little bit of flashing on the parting lines of things, but not too bad. It's comparable to pretty much any tool. They could maybe do a little bit better job in their cleanup before assembly, but that's really not a negative. Like I said, this is comparable to most other tools and their manufacturing. So I put that right in the middle. Not a pro, not a con. Dust collection is kind of in the middle. Given that a tool like this creates a huge volume of chips, dust collection is critical for something like this. I would say it collected about 3/4 of the dust once I was plugged in. Well, these are chips, not dust. Once I was plugged into my 1.25-inch shop vac. Just as a note, all the cuts you saw me take produced about a full gallon plus of chips, and most of that did end up in my dust collector from the times I was uncollected or what it threw out. This is unplugged. Along the knife, along the side here, when I was plugged into the dust collection, ended up on the floor, and I had to clean that up. I think I've already said it, but this brand's an unknown to me, so I put that right up the middle. I'm open-minded about this. I'm looking forward to incorporating this tool specifically and some of the other things in my workflow and just seeing what I think. Interested in seeing what's going to go wrong over time and how their customer service responds. Okay, let's go through the cons. First of all, the user manual, I got to put it in the not so great category. It wasn't horrible, but it's not the best user manual. I'm one that I really, if a user manual is well written, that's going to get my attention on a product. If they're telling me how to set things up, if they're giving me tips about the tool, I know that these people really care about their quality. In general, it covers the basics on the user manual. There's a little bit on safety here. There's a little bit on setup. It does not have a detailed diagram of the tool and its accessories. I actually found out through market research that there are a bunch of accessories for this planer. They didn't highlight any of those in the manual. I didn't even know they existed. I had to figure out, although this is pretty simple assembly, I'm a knucklehead sometimes. I had to figure out, how to assemble all the little doodads. Had all my own. There wasn't even a parts list that described or named these parts, which I think is helpful whenever you're figuring things out. So I think the manual can be improved. Number two, I got to put my own con out there. I'm not really the best person to be reviewing a handheld power planer itself. I've only used probably 2 to 3 different brands of these in the past. I don't have a whole lot of routine experience using one. So I can't really list out the features that I think are must-haves versus nice-to-haves versus what's out there. So I got to put my own inexperience with a tool like this out there as a con for this review. That going right into those of you that have experience using one of these, those that might use this a lot and are looking for a new one, I'd love to hear the types of uses that you have used one in the past for, and love to hear your thoughts on the features down below in the comments. That way we can have a little bit of a discussion about this planer and how it might stack up to others. I can answer questions specifically about this model if you're looking to purchase one, and I'll be happy to answer any questions I can about this model itself and what's on it, what I think about different parts of it, if you've got specific questions. Okay, let's go into the pros list. Okay, so this is this is the only 10 amp I was able to find through some brief market research. I didn't scour the internet for a 10 amp planer, but I did at least spend probably 15-20 minutes looking for one. So I think that's a pro. I think they're going for an industry leading category here. I did find a large Makita that has a 6 3/4 inch cutter width, and that thing retailed for $790. I can't remember the motor sizing on it, but it might have been up there close to this. That segues into the power category. I felt absolutely no need for more power with this thing. Even through the full width passes in this panel, it didn't really bog down in any way. I noticed no lack of power when coming into a cut or coming out of a cut. It seemed like it had exactly the amount of power that it needs to do its job. These are new sharp knives, so that's probably a factor too. Another pro is this thing is upgradable. I found through researching online that they actually make a stand for this where you can bolt on a guard and put it in a stand so you can operate this as a regular benchtop planer, which I thought was pretty cool, or jointer, which I thought was pretty cool. I don't know how it would perform in that way, but it's definitely something to think about. I put cut quality in a pro. I'm pretty impressed with his surface finish. One side of this was planed with my DeWalt planer, and the other side was planed with this. And there is absolutely no difference coming out of a thickness planer and coming off of this handheld planer. So that's definitely something to consider. There is pretty good cut quality coming off of this thing. Another thing that kind of tells me that this tool is pretty well made, the motor sounds pretty good when it's moving. It is a brushed motor. It just sounded pretty good, and there was no user vibration. So when I power this thing up, hold it at full speed, engage with a cut, almost no vibration was making it back to my hand. So I think the ergonomics of this thing are pretty good. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this thing. I'd love to hear your thoughts if you've ordered from Banggood, and just your user experiences there. Was their customer service good? Was it bad? What are your thoughts? I think that this company is trying to compete with Amazon and some of the big mail order companies. So I'm interested to see on how they do with market penetration and just customer service, because I know Amazon's really good at customer service. So be interested to see how that plays out. Other than that, I'm going to end it there. Thanks for watching. Hey, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new here, I'm going to throw a subscribe button right above me. Feel free to click it if this is something you're interested in. I'll have lots more videos like it. I'm going to put a couple videos over here to my right that I think you'll enjoy. Feel free to check them out. If you found some value in this video, hit the thumbs up button. That helps this video do a little bit better. So do your comments. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this video or your tips that go along with it. Thanks again for watching all the way to the end of the video, and I'll see you in the next one.